So this is going to be a song on, well, it's from Led Zeppelin. And I'm going to relate this to the discussion today on mythos and how our mythoi allow us to see the world. And I'm going to see if I can do this without messing up my setup here. And then I'll analyze the lyrics of the song here. So this is Ramble On. Leaves are falling all around. I was on my way. Thanks to you, I'm much obliged for such a pleasant stay. Now it's time for me to go. The autumn moonlight's my way. And now I smell the rain and with it pain, and it's headed my way. Ramble on, now the time is now. Sing my song, I'm going round the world, I gotta find my girl on my way. I've been this way 10 years today, I gotta ramble on. I gotta find the queen of all my dreams, scrolling ahead here. Got no time for spreading news, my freedom. The time has come to be gone. And though our health we drank 1,000 times, it's time to ramble on. Mine's a tale that can't be told. My freedom I hold dear. How years ago in days of old, magic filled the air. It was in the darkest depths of morning I met a girl so fair. Got on the evil one, crept up and slipped away with her, yeah. Nothing I can do now. Ramble on, now the time is now. Sing my song, I'm going round the world, I gotta find my girl on my way. I've been this way most of the day, I gotta ramble on. Ramble on. So, what is significant about this song? Let me get this set up a little better here. Okay. And it's going to be the Tolkien-esque imagery in the song by Led Zeppelin, where you have the years ago in days of old when magic filled the air. So I don't believe in magic literally, but I believe that the way humans attentively understand the world involves magic in the sense of enchantment, that there's a mythos, there's a storyline that shapes how I can attend to the proper things so that the world comes alive to me. And it's not just this kind of dead thing that I've analyzed to death and dissected. And that's why there's beauty and art and poetry and song and dance, and that all these modes of a human activity get at what is real. And if you don't have those modes, you don't get to what is real. If you just use logic and math and physics, you're not going to get to what's real. And in fact, you can't even do physics unless you have the mythos. And so in this story where the narrator is rambling on because he's got to find his girl because Gollum, the evil one, crept up and slipped away with her, and so forth. And he's got to go into the darkest depths of Mordor. So this is a challenge that he must face and face Gollum, the evil one, and keep on chasing that reality, that telos, that end, that purpose, that mission. Okay, so that's a kind of song-based approach to understanding what's real. So now I'm going to do a little analytics approach to what's real. And I'm going to present, 6 theses, like a thesis, many theses is a theses, and theses about mythos and mythoi. Mythoi means many mythoses. And how my mythos, my worldview, my feel for the world, my operating system functions so that I can see the world and see it alive as it is. And so let me see if my screen sharing function will function. And pardon my notes, don't look at the notes, just look at the questions. And here are my 6 theses that I'm going to cover today briefly, using John Vervaeke, as I often do, a psychologist and cognitive scientist, where he says that people critique their own mythos and take off your glasses to look at them. And he has that image, that meme of him taking off his glasses, and I'll do the same later today. Second point, frame making and frame breaking, that we have to alternate between both of these. Like we have the frame, the mythos, the kind of setup that I look at the world from, and then I break that from, I critique it, so I do both. Third, in order to get at the world, we need to be open to wonder, and through art, and that opens us up, that gives us that awe instinct for awe, instinct for wonder that we need. Fourth, that we see symbols in the world, and this comes from the instinct for awe and admiration. We want a charismatic person, that admiration that we have. 5, contemplating art allows us to see the world more fully, more symbolically, more meaningfully. And 6, we must respect the behavioral patterns reflected in ritualized stories embedded in our psychological makeup, which comes from 2 million years of evolutionary history. So let me take these one at a time. And let's take the first one, which, going from John Vervaeke, has the concept of me taking off my glasses. And I guess I'll go ahead. Let's just do this physically. And so right now I'm looking at the world through my glasses. Okay, it's a lens that allows the focus to be clear, so I can see the world clearly. But sometimes I take off my glasses and I look at the glasses and I examine the lens. And I try to understand, how is it working? What's the angle? What's the shape? What's the concavity? And so this image of the person looking at his glasses is the image, the meme that John Vervaeke uses to get at this question of looking at the lens, looking at the mythos, looking at the worldview or world feel, more accurately, that allows me to see the world. And then you say, well, then what? you just keep the glasses off and just look at the world perfectly freely. You don't have to have a mythos. You don't have to have a world feel to get at the world. No, you can't see anything. And I'm not blind, but things are all just blurry to me because I have astigmatism and I have really thick glasses. And so I need to put my glasses back on. And this, gets at that question: could, if we had a dialogue of people in a circle and we had the what different worldviews, and I had my Muslim friend over here looking at the world in the middle, and I'm the Christian, so I'm the Christian looking at the world, and then you have the agnostic person looking at the world, and then you have the Marxist person looking at the world, and we're all looking at the world from our perspective, with our own angle, with our own glasses, and then we could say, well, maybe one of these people doesn't have glasses. Maybe the agnostic, because they don't have a belief system, they don't have a mythos, they're just looking at it perfectly freely, right? Wrong. Everybody's got glasses. In a certain sense, everybody's got eyes. You've got a lens in your eye, and you can't see the world without a lens. And so this is an important point, that we can tend to think that people with a kind of Quran or Bible or Tao Te Ching book that they kind of imbibe and that shapes the way they see the world, well, they're seeing the world through that particular lens. But then someone who doesn't have a belief system doesn't have any lens. But that's not true. Everyone's got the lens. And if you don't see your lens, then you're the most deluded of all, because you're not able to critique and understand the fact that you have a lens. And so I wanted to look at this in terms of thinking about the mythoi, the mythoses in this chart. Now, pardon me for having these kind of unfinished notes, but I think it's useful. And so here's my chart in which I'm looking at the mythoi of the Norse mythology, of an Israelite or Hebrew mythology. And I don't mean mythology as in false. I'm a Christian, so I believe that that's true. But I mean mythology just in terms of it's a set of beliefs, and then a Marxist mythology. And let's take a look at what do they see. And so the mythoi, the storyline is that the gods show human psychology, human development. We see this when Odin sacrifices himself in order to gain wisdom. This is a psychological reality about humans that's embedded in that story. In order to gain sight, he's got to lose one of his eyes. This kind of paradox. Loki is in touch with his own shadow side, his dark side. This gives him strength, but it also opens up the possibility of destruction, because anyway, it gives birth to beings which are going to end up destroying the world. That doesn't make him a bad person. It just means there's that possibility. And so this is one way, and this is my interpretation of how Norse mythology reflects reality. Let's look at the Israelite or Hebrew reflection of reality, that God made everything. So this is going from Genesis. In the beginning, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, and he divided the light from the darkness, and so forth. God made everything, including the humans, and this is according to a narrative. And Robert Bellah, in his book on the religion in human evolution, analyzes Judaism in this form, saying that they have this narrative theology of steps. First, there's a promise by God, there's a failure by humans, then there's a punishment by God, and then God redeems the humans. And this pattern repeats itself over and over again in the Israelite or Hebrew people's story in the Bible. It's amazing how it does happen over and over again. So these are two ways of reflecting on the human reality in these two mythoi, and according to these two mythoi. And then according to like a Marxist mythoi, and pardon me, I'm not a Marxist, so I'm just guessing at how they would look at it from my own understanding of Marxism, is that human work is a value, is the main value, and which I agree with, by the way, and that power over the means of production is what matters. I don't agree with that, but that's what they focus on, at least in some forms of Marxism. And so they want to take over the means of production from the capitalists and give it to the proletarian workers, let them run things. And it's a nice theory. Anyway, that's the theory. And you know, it could work. Maybe it could work in some instances. It hasn't worked so far. It's worked disastrously, I would say, in places like the Soviet Union and China and Vietnam and Cuba and Venezuela. Anyway, it's got its problems, but it's a coherent system. So these are three coherent systems, mythoi. And then how does this work out further in this next step? In the Norse mythos, we honor the gods and offer them proper sacrifices, as the people in Scandinavia were doing, and I guess some people still are today. And then we seek to be a brave warrior and gain a reward, as we see happens where Odin takes the brave warriors to Valhalla and they get their reward. So this is how this mythos shapes the people. How does the Israelite mythos shape the people? Well, they're supposed to trust God, not themselves. Don't build the Tower of Babel by yourself to heaven. Trust in God to get you to heaven. Don't try to use technology and power to build that tower to heaven. And trust things to God. You know, pray, do the temple sacrifices, do the things that Jews do the rituals of Passover and the Seder meal and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and so forth. And then in a Marxist idea, what do? You identify the oppressors, attack, and take things away from them, and then all will be well. And we'll have the dictatorship by the proletariat, and the state will wither away, and everybody will be happy in a perfect communist utopia. So these are the way these mythoi, these mythoses, envision the world working out for the people who follow that. So good. So you have to be within your mythos in order to like see the world, and each of us from within our mythos does that. So what I would like to say next is the concept of frame making and frame breaking. And this is, I'm getting this from John Vervaeke, and that we're moving between these two modes. We're frame making and frame, I'm gonna run out of room here, I'll just make it short, frame breaking. And so in these two modes, okay, a little bit out of, let me fix that. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, it should be, there it goes. Okay. And so, and the frame is what? The frame is the mythos, or it comes from the mythos. It's the way of imagining the world, doing your storytelling. You do that by your storytelling, by your mythos telling, or by your painting. If you're an artist, you do a painting, or you do a story, you do a song. If you're a politician, you kind of give your speech. You develop that tale. And when this is the making of it. And we do this by being artists. The artist painter, the artist storyteller, the artist songmaker is doing that, laying it out, using your mythos. But then we stop and we meditate. And he was talking in terms of Buddhist meditation, which was the type of meditation that John Vervaeke was engaging in. I do a different type of meditation, but it's similar, where you break the frame, where you analyze it, you critique it. And so these are both good steps to do. You go from one to the other, and then you go back. It's false, I would argue, and Vervaeke's arguing, to say, let's just break the frame. We don't need to make any frame. It's like, let me take off my glasses. I don't need glasses to see the world. No, you need to go back and forth. You can't just critique everything. And so those theories, those literary theories or critical theories that say like, oh, I'm just pure critique, get nowhere and have nothing to say ultimately. And they have, and you can argue, have no effect in the world really, actually. And so, and they also just don't see the world accurately because you can't see the world then. So if we take an example, and just a simple example, in the Star Wars mythos, this one's the beauty of the Star Wars mythos. It's very familiar to many of us, and it builds on so many of the mythoi that have fed into our culture, from the Christian, the Judeo-Christian one, to the Buddhist one, to some pagan ones, and magical ones. And so what you have there is the young man Luke Skywalker, LS. And he starts off as a kind of undifferentiated, undeveloped human being, and then he's called forth. And this is kind of the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell's analyzed this, and in fact, when he was writing this story, George Lucas was basically copying or getting these ideas straight out of Joseph Campbell, as well as out of other stories, like I was mentioning, and so he's called to be a Jedi. He's called to face his shadow. His shadow is Darth Vader, and it turns out that's actually his father too. So it's all these stories mixed into one. It's a wonderful story. And you've got the Force, which is kind of like a Buddhist approach to non-striving, or Taoist approach, you could say, to non-striving. Or you could take, to give it a female slant, Katniss Everdeen, and another story that many of us are familiar with, the Hunger Games, where she starts off in a poor family. It's almost the same story. Poor family in District 12, called forth to be the symbol of the rebellion. And she's going to be this crucial figure who's going to lead this rebellion against an oppressive government, the capital. And so this is someone entering into their story. Okay, third thesis. Can I use the same sheet here? Let's try this. Is going to be that we need wonder in order to open up to awe. And the world is awesome. And if we don't see that, it's because our window is clouded up. We need to clean the window by means of art, by means of mythos, by means of inspiration. And that can be happening in a fantasy story, or a wonderful painting, or a wonderful song, where the world opens up to us and we're filled with awe. And we're able to contemplate the world as it's there. We open up our awe instinct. And I always do this silly drawing of the person looking at the world. Here's the world. And at first they're looking through their window, and it's all kind of cloudy with the dross of daily existence and the rat race and going to work and going to school and doing your homework and doing this and that. And so when we have the mythos in a wonderful work of art, it cleans our window And so all of a sudden we see undreamed of color and form and shape and pattern, and we are in awe. And we're not just seeing the world accurately, we're seeing it in an inspired way. And so this is crucial, opening up wonder. And in fact, the Greeks saw wonder as the beginning of philosophy. You can't do philosophy until you have wonder. Okay. Next step is number 4. Once we open up that wonder, we see symbols. And this comes from our instinct for awe. We have an instinct, just like we have an instinct for food and for sex. We have these drives. We have an instinct for awe. And we want to admire what's beautiful and what's glorious. And, that feeds into religion, it feeds into art, it feeds into politics even. And this opens us up, and we become open and to see symbols, and we see meanings. The meaning crisis, in a certain sense, comes from not having mythoi. And, then we kind of starved ourselves, or we starved our instinct for awe. And then there's this meaning crisis. And so whether it's being in awe of a charismatic person who's leading us, and we say, I want to follow you, or being in awe of a beautiful mountain, and we say, I'm going to climb that mountain, or I'm going to honor that mountain by building something so I can look at it and contemplate this glorious image that's important. It's not just a bunch of rocks. It's something that's glorious. It's got meaning. These are seeing the world meaningfully with mythic thinking. We're seeing with mythic thinking or symbolic thinking. Thinking isn't just logical thinking. It involves these other modes of thinking. Okay. So then we have the fact that as we contemplate this art, and actually, whether it's nature or art, and I'm contemplating art, it's going to allow me to see the world more symbolically, as I was saying. And I wanted to quote a person named David Ferguson, who says that there are, how do I say this? Let's talk about 2 types of questions. There are what we could call how questions and why questions. And let me read a little bit from David Ferguson. And actually, I guess I'll just put it on the screen here since I have it printed out. Be a little bit tight, but okay, do our best here. And so, starting here, David Ferguson says in an article in Science and Religion, science is preoccupied with how questions in relation to how the physical world behaves at the quantum level, how galaxies emerged from the Big Bang, how animals have evolved from earlier species which are now extinct, how our bodies function, and how disease occurs. These are all scientific questions, and the progress that scientists have made in addressing these over several centuries deserves our admiration and respect. So this is good. These are how questions, and we've done a lot with them. Religion, on the other hand, attempts to address why questions. Why is there a universe at all? Why does it behave in such regular and intelligible ways? Why are we here? Why should I love my neighbor as myself? Why is this action wrong? And here Ferguson is adducing religion, and I'm going to kind of bracket that and let's just talk about art and story as a kind of what I'm focusing on now, and that these also ask these why questions. Why is there a universe at all? Why does it behave in such regular and intelligible ways? Why does it have these patterns in it? Are these patterns real, or is this my projection of them? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What's my calling? What's the telos? What's the end? So these questions are crucial. And if we don't ask these questions, we're not really seeing the reality of the world. And I say that because there's a significant number of scientists and other theorists who say there are no why questions, because all the how questions are going to answer all the why questions, all the scientific, empirical questions about chemistry and physics and biology. Once we have all those questions, these questions will disappear because we'll have it all figured out. It's just a matter of time. And I want to disagree with that and say, no, these why questions perdure, and we need to keep asking them, even in order to understand physics, really. Because physics, how do you talk about where did the universe come from? Or how did it begin, and how's it going to end? If it's going to end, is it going to end? Like those questions, physics cannot answer. I mean, it can get us close, and in fact, our science of the Big Bang, as I understand it, I'm not an expert on it, but gets us to like several milliseconds before the beginning of the Big Bang, as far as we can tell in terms of our measurements, or what we can measure. But we have to engage in almost poetic thinking to just start thinking about what happened before that, or at that moment. And so anyway, that gets into the realm of art and potentially religion. Okay, so that's thesis 5. And now thesis 6, which is that we must respect the behavioral patterns embedded in our psychological makeup. So we need to respect the behavioral patterns. What do I mean by this? As we were saying, these mythoi, these myths, correspond to the behavioral patterns in our psychology. We have a psychology that's real, and it began to be analyzed by people like Freud and Jung and Adler. And Freud used his different theses about the id and the superego and the ego and the Oedipal complex and so forth. And we don't have to agree with all that, but there's pointing to something that's real there, and we've developed beyond that, I would say, to a more full understanding of psychology, and that's our behavioral patterns. And we need to respect human development. And I say this because as we enter the AI age, if I can call it that, I'm going off of a theorist, a historian, a wonderful historian named Noah Yuval Harari, who's an Israeli thinker. I believe he's not a believer, but he's Israeli, he's in the Jewish tradition, and where he points out that AI has certain risks with it, because AI is very powerful, and it's getting more and more powerful, and we're using it to do powerful things, which is good. These are good things. We shouldn't not do them. But if we could change ourselves using AI technologies, anything we do to change ourselves will make us worse. In other words, I could use my technology to make myself live 700 years or a million years. I could change my biology. And I'm not saying we shouldn't absolutely not do that. We should not absolutely do that. But we must be very careful. And the likelihood is, if we change ourselves, we're going to make things worse. Because these behavioral patterns have been developed over millions of years of biological evolution that have been balancing our drives, our sociability, our ability to work together, our relationships between males and females, relationships between tribes. And if we start monkeying with ourselves, we're not respecting the millions of years of natural evolution that have created that pattern and that balance among those patterns. And like, it's going to get worse. Like, we think, oh, all I want is to live forever and everything's going to be great. And no, that's not going to lead to good endings. Um, and so we need to respect these behavioral patterns. Yes, do medicine, improve human life, fight disease, but don't fundamentally change the human being, because you're going to make things worse. And right now, we could clone human beings, or at least this is now a new possibility. We can design human beings with CRISPR technology to design DNA, give my child blue eyes, blonde hair, 6'5", the ability to dunk, all these things that I want to give my child, let's say. That's bad. This is not a good way to make children. We need to respect the biology of how humans have sex to make babies. That there's something fundamentally important about that process, that natural process, and so forth. So those are my theses. I think I'm going to cut it off there. I had more, but I'm just going to pause it there, and we'll do more next time.